Alright, I'm going to do a quick video here on how to set up your rifle, some do's and don'ts. I want to go over a couple different ways of setting up your rifle and for different types of use, because everybody has different goals in mind. First things first, anything I show, any rifle that I put up here will have been safety checked. And next, I'll talk about two guiding principles I use when setting up a rifle, especially when it comes to a rifle that will be used for defensive uses. The first is the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. The reason for that is that if you are forced to use a firearm in defense, you're going to be under a lot of mental stress due to the situation. The more complication you have to your firearm, the more you're going to be fumbling with it, or the more you're going to make mistakes and cause problems with your rifle. And that's just not what you want to do. You want to try to keep things simple so you have less chance of having issues. Training does help mitigate that kind of problem, but it will never eliminate it completely. And the simpler you have your rifle, the easier it is to train problems away and have your familiarity with the rifle be more instinctual. So, the next principle I hold to is don't try to be a jack of all trades. Pick a role for your rifle and set it up for that. If you need it for defensive use, set it up for defensive use. Don't try to set it up to be long range, some precision at long range and defensive use. There's a reason for this, and that is because defensive use is primarily focused on in your home, maybe some in your yard. But either way, it's going to be close range, 25 yards and less. At 25 yards and above, doubt can start to be cast upon your need to have used deadly force. So, especially outdoors. Now, you do not need to be focusing on longer ranges when that's not practical for a defensive rifle. You're not in combat somewhere where you might be with many different ranges. You're in your home. So stick with that in mind if you're going to be setting up a rifle for defensive use. Now, I'll talk about defensive use first because that tends to be what a lot of people want to think about first and foremost, usually. But if you're here, if you want to set up a rifle for just general plinking and fun, you can deviate and to your heart's content, because it's not a problem at that point. It's just for fun and just for the range. Just realize that if you have a red dot on your rifle and a bipod, people are going to look at you funny. So not really a need for a bipod for just a simple red dot sight. Now, there is overlap for most people who just want to plink and have fun and the defensive role, simply because people that want to plink and have fun, most ranges in the United States are 100 yards or less. And that's generally tends to be the easier ranges for most people to just get set up at and shoot and things. So they're just going to be wanting to shoot at less than 100 yards, and the setups that are a setup that's good for defense will work very effectively at 100 yards and even a little farther, out to 200 or 300 yards if you have the skills. So it's not exclusive that it has to be a defensive setup only. When in other roles like precision shooting at extended ranges and things like that, hunting and stuff, they tend to call for vastly different setups, and we'll go over that here in a little bit. So what do I mean by a defensive setup and keeping it simple? Something like this. While You do not need free-floated on a defensive rifle because, you know, free-floating doesn't add accuracy. It just allows the barrel to be more consistent, which improves accuracy. The difference that something like a free float would make to accuracy is minuscule to non-existent at 25 yards and in, and even if it was as much as an inch or two at 100 yards and you were actually needing to use it at 100 yards, the difference between a 1-inch group and a 2 or 3-inch group is pretty much negligible in a rifle that's actually being used for fighting. If it's a good center mass hit, it's a good center mass hit. So free floating isn't necessary unless you just like it. If you're keeping it simple, you don't really need all the extra rail space anyway. Like this, set up like this, the basic set of backup irons. Not likely if you're using a good quality red dot that you'll need them, but it's always nice to have them because they don't add much weight and they're out of the way. A red dot sight, because they're good and quick and easy to use. I prefer one that has long battery lives like Aimpoint, because you can turn it on, leave it on, and not worry about it. These things will run for years with the setting on a medium setting. So you just occasionally change the battery, just like you change the battery in a smoke detector, just to make sure, just to be safe. The only thing I would add to this rifle would be to add a flashlight, because I think that all defensive rifles need a flashlight for target identification. You do not want to be woken up in the middle of the night by an odd sound and go shooting blindly at the rustling or the flash of movement you saw. It could be a spouse, it could be a teenager who snuck out early in the night and was less successful at being sneaky when they were trying to get back in the house. Either way, there are situations where you do not want to be shooting blindly. Even if you live alone, you do not want to be shooting blindly. You want to know exactly what you're shooting at. Also, if you can see it, it's much easier to aim and hit what you're shooting at. So you can use a flashlight offensively as well. They can blind and disorientate an assailant, so that's a positive as well. Some tips for your flashlight is that 100 to 150 lumens is usually sufficient to do the job. It's bright enough to see the room and targets and identify things, and it's bright enough to blind somebody when you shine it at them. So you do not need the most output possible from a flashlight. In fact, as you start increasing the output of your flashlight, you start running more into the risk that you will blind yourself with that flashlight when the light bounces off walls or other reflective objects. You can blind yourself with reflected light. Just because you've tested your flashlight by going into the bathroom, shutting the door, and shining the light, and it doesn't seem too bright to you then, it isn't the same as when you wake up in the middle of the night. Because when you're acclimated, which takes about 30 minutes to do, when you're acclimated to the dark, that light will seem much brighter. And another thing, flashlights that have a very concentrated beam or have a hot spot in that beam, in a beam, will tend to start to be more likely to blind you at a lower power outputs. Flashlights that have more diffuse light can get brighter with less chances of issues in that regard, because it spreads that same amount of light over better, over more distance. A flashlight that's actually better for this kind of use because it illuminates the room better and gives you better situational awareness and easier identification of targets. So I would choose one like that over one with a hot spot and a concentrated beam. Now, this is a fairly high-end setup. Not everybody would be able to go with something like this. So you can go cheaper, and cheaper doesn't mean bad, as long as you get quality stuff. A setup like this, just Magpul grips, the clamshell style grips. You can even use the old plastic ones that come on them like this. You just need a way to effectively put a light on it, and there are different mounting options. This has a standard front sight post on it. I don't find that a problem. With a lower 1/3 co-witness, it just kind of hangs out and it's out of my way. And a basic flip up backup sight and a basic red dot. Now you have to remember to turn a red dot like this on. This is why I prefer something like the aim points. But if you can't get an aim point, if you can't get into that price range, Primary Arms makes their advanced red dot, which is basically a copy of the Aimpoint Micro series. Very small, very trim, doesn't take up a lot of room, and it doesn't block vision, and it has battery life that measures in years for about half the price of an Aimpoint Pro, or a little bit more than half the price. So that, and it's also a brand that is known for making fairly good quality stuff at a reasonable price. So, you know, you can pick something like that up instead of more expensive gear. But if you can use something like this, which is a cheaper sight, and it's still effective. It's just you do have to remember to turn it on. Now, I'll bring out some stuff that is more precision orientated. Now, there are different reasons to want precision at extended ranges: bench rest shooting, hunting, things like that. There's a lot of overlap, but some differences based on the role. A bench rest shooter isn't going to be worried about weight so much. A hunter may be worried about weight, depending on how they hunt and what they're hunting. And then you have setups like this with a more tactical look. This is just aesthetic choice mostly when it comes to stuff like this, because I don't need the rail space or things like that. I just don't like the look of the simple tubes. I prefer a look like this. Now, it has backup irons on it, and they're completely strictly emergency backups kind of a setup. They're not set up to be usable in a dual role kind of a thing. But I just find that a rifle without a backup sight just kind of looks weird to me. So I put them on my rifles. Now, I put this up here as an illustration. This is an 18-inch barrel with a heavy profile. It's a full power scope that's significantly in weight. So this rifle is larger and much heavier than a standard carbine would be. So that compromises this rifle's ability to be used effectively in close quarters. So even if you throw an offset red dot on this thing, you're still compromised when it comes to using this for defensive use, because you're wielding something that's much larger and heavier. That's why I say pick a role and stick with it. If defense is one of the uses you need the rifle for, that needs to be your focus, because when you need it to be very effective tool. You don't need it to be glutzied up and a hindrance to you. So there you go. Now, some of you may be thinking, but I see examples of people using rifles like this in the military. They have the offset red dot on there. I mean, if it didn't work, they wouldn't do it. There's a reason for that. And that is that the military operate in teams, fire teams and squads, and things like that. You're not working alone unless something has really gone wrong for you. So when you're not working alone, the fact that you're a compromised short range is offset by the fact that the guy next to you has a light handy rifle that's really good for close range. and you're there for when he really needs that long shot to be taken. So yes, they may have it set up with a red dot so he can more effectively defend himself should he need to at closer ranges. That way he's not left blind without a way to sight if the need should arise that he has to engage at close ranges. That's not what the rifle is designed for, and that's not what he's there for. Should the need arise that they have to kick down a door for whatever reason, the guy with this rifle would not be the first one in line through the door. He would most likely be the last one through the door, providing rear cover and an extra set of eyes, because the guy in the rear, it would be a little less impactful for the rifle to be slow on the use in close quarters, and it would be for the guy first in the door. So there you go. You got to keep in mind that when you're setting up these rifles, and you just because the military does it, it's not because they think the rifle can do two things. It's just a backup solution just in case something happens and they do need to be using the rifle at close range. They're not left blind, and they're not completely useless in situations like that. Now, you may be thinking, well, they have 1 to 4 power, or 1 to 6, or 1 to 8 even. If I want to spend that kind of money, I can just get one of those scopes and use them just like a red dot, right? Well, you mean something like this, right? And I'm going to tell you right now, no, you're not. No. The big reason is this is a scope. Even on 1 power, it is still a scope. Unlike a red dot, which is very flexible in how you hold the rifle and how you position your head behind it, and which you all you need to be able to do is see the dot, and you can use the rifle to sight with and aim. You cannot do that with a scope. Even on 1 power, you have to have your head behind this thing properly. If you're not holding your head behind the scope correctly, then you're going to get the tunnel vision, the out of focus reticle, out of focus image, all the things that come with not being properly aligned behind a standard scope applies to this scope even in 1 power. So you're immediately handicapped by that. You're going to be slower than somebody with a red dot. There's just no way around it. If you train, maybe not, the hit is minimal, but it's still going to be there. These sights, backup sights, are strictly emergency backups. As I said, they're not the offsets, but with a set of offsets, it does kind of change things a little bit. But before I get into that, this rifle is what they call a recce, or a Reese, however you want to pronounce it. It is a recon rifle, as they say. Standard 16-inch barrel, regular profile, with a low power scope on it. This rifle is not designed for close quarters use. It's not even really secondary kind of a thing with this. This rifle is set up to be effective at medium ranges. It is for use outdoor, not for kicking down a door. To kicking down a door to a building, this is for outdoors use. For guys on patrol or forward recon, whatever reason they need to be out there where they're likely to engage an enemy at ranges farther than like a QCB close range stuff, but not extended ranges. So a little bit of magnification is really nice to be able to get a better view of an enemy position, or to take a little bit more precision of a shot if need be at those ranges up to about 300 meters or yards, whichever way you want to go with. Now, with an offset red dot, the impact of this particular setup on defensive close range use is much lower than, say, the other rifle I just showed, because this scope doesn't take up much more room than a red dot, and it doesn't weigh too much more either. So it can effectively be used that way. But these rifles were set up, as I said, they're to support and augment the abilities of the team. They're not designed for an individual to be able to do anything and everything with. They're to augment teams with enhanced abilities. So if you absolutely just had to have a setup that you could use more than one, I would say a setup like this with offsets can work for defensive use. But like I said, when it comes to the KISS principle, it does violate the KISS principle. So I avoid situations like that. This rifle I set up for fun and range use. It's not something I would use for defense. If I had it, end of the world came and I augmented a team of people, yeah, I hand this to somebody and stuff like that. But no, it just general fun and range use, but not home defense. That's why I strongly encourage the KISS principle for a defensive rifle. When it comes to range, you're more flexible in what you can do. So just keep those things in mind. Don't try to hodgepodge and mix and match things. Keep your build focused, and you'll usually get much better results in the end.